Hello, everyone. Today I'm talking about groupthink, and the quote that they gave in the beginning of the book is groups, like individuals, have shortcomings. Groups can be the worst as well as the best. So this basically talks about how people work in groups and how the best way to do it kind of is. Um, the history of the theory comes from a man named Irving Janis. He kind of started it in, I want to say, 1972. Groupthink is participating in groups is a fact of life, whether people are at school, work, a volunteer agency, a spiritual meeting, or even another venue. They frequently spend a significant amount of hours together. I kind of think this works as like being in school and doing group projects or working with your future team whenever you start your new career. You'll always be working with people, whether you kind of like it or not. I know I personally work best with being by myself rather than like other people, because then I can do it my way and not have to worry about what other people are saying. Um, Groupthink is defined as a way of group deliberation that minimizes conflict and emphasizes the need for unanimity, which is also basically saying that you all come to an agreement by everyone involved. Since the beginning of human history, people have made decisions in groups. So in the book, they kind of talk about during the development of groupthink, Janis analyzed 5 matters of significant national importance. They talk about the preparedness policies the U.S. gave the Navy during Pearl Harbor in 1941. The second one, the decision to pursue the North Korean army onto its own territory by President Eisenhower. The third one is the decision by President Kennedy to invade Cuba at the Bay of Pigs shortly after Fidel Castro established a communist government. Number 4 is the decision to continue the Vietnam War as President Johnson. And 5, the Watergate cover-up by President Nixon. Janis argues that each of these policies decisions were made by both the president and like his team of officers. So basically the people that he works best with to come up with these situations and to figure out how to work best and make the most like outcome out of all of these. Next, the theory at a glance portion of the book just talked about how groups frequently fail to consider alternative to their course because you always want to have that one person that wants to do it their way and not the other way and want to work with people to have the best outcome. They just think theirs is always the best. When group members think similarly, you do not entertain contrary views. So that way, if you have someone that has the same views as you working in your group, it's very easy for you guys to be able to work together and have those abilities to have a more effective debate, if you will. Those debates then lead to not having as many arguments because you all agree on the same kind of thing. Groupthink suggests that these groups make premature decisions and some of them have lasting and tragic consequences. So those groups are kind of the people that have all different abilities and are all the people that are very hard to work with compared to like your own preference of people. The assumptions of groupthink are conditions in group promote high cohesiveness. In the book, it kind of explains that cohesiveness is defined as the extent to which group members are willing to work together. It is a group's sense of togetherness. So cohesion arises from a group's like attitudes and values and patterns of behavior. Those members are like very much attracted to each other and want to work with them and have joy out of working with them, and they always come up with like the best ways to do things. The second one was group problem solving is primarily a unified process. The process of problem solving in small groups, it is usually a unified undertaking. By this, we mean that people are not predisposed to disrupting decision making in small groups. Members essentially strive to get along, so they want to be as easygoing as possible and make it better for everyone to work together. Group members then seem more inclined to follow the leader when decision-making time arrives, so it makes it easier for you all to agree on something and everything else. Number 3 is groups and group decision-making are frequently complex. basically saying it underscores the nature of most problem-solving and task-oriented groups to which people belong. They are usually complex. In discussing the assumption, the first look at the complexity of small groups, and then the decisions emerging from these groups. This one kind of talked about how they not only understand the task at hand, but also the people who provide the input into the task. So they try to take it from both ways. Like, this person has good input, even though it might not be like what we're looking for, they're still at least trying to help work with you. Some of the symptoms that the book goes over, the symptoms are pre-existing conditions led groups to concurrent seeking. So concurrent seeking is efforts to search out group consensus. So it's trying to find like how you're able to work best with those people and what they kind of use. The first one is illusion of invulnerability. This can be defined as a group's belief that they are special enough to overcome any obstacles or setbacks. So that one's really, I think that one's very productive because it helps like people know that they are invincible and that they have all the power in this and that they're very strong and know that they can handle this kind of input or output that they're giving to people. In the book, they related this to the Vietnam War, and Janice explains that President Johnson's foreign policy group wanted to avoid peace negotiations because they did not want to be viewed as having little bargaining power. The group therefore was willing to take a risk and believed that selecting bombing targets in North Vietnam was a wise course of action rather than trying to find world peace and trying to please everyone around you. They just want to do what was best for our country rather than the surrounding countries. Belief in the inherent morality of the group. This group is usually known for being said to adopt the position that we are a good and wise group. So they don't start out very strong as a group, but they work their way into thinking like, wow, we did a good job, guys. The book also hit on this with like the Vietnam War stuff because they knew they weren't very confident and probably made their way to make it seem more confident for them. The next one is outgroup stereotypes. Outgroup stereotypes are stereotyped perceptions of rivals or enemies. These stereotypes underscore the fact that any adversaries are either too weak or too stupid to counter offensive tactics. So this one kind of made me think they're kind of the need more help and guidance kind of group. They're here and they're important, but they're not the most important, and they don't use like a lot of their stuff that comes from this group is how I kind of thought of it. Collective rationalization refers to the situation in which group members ignore warnings that might prompt them to reconsider their thoughts and actions before they reach a final decision. So this one is like, hey, this probably isn't working, so we probably shouldn't be doing this, but they do it anyways because it's working in their plan and it helps their plan work overall. The book gives a good example of saying in most circumstances, this symptom can also be interpreted to be a rationalization of bad news, where it's like someone comes in and it's like, oh, but what if this happens? And they're like, oh no, this won't happen because this is what our plan is. That's the way I thought of that one. The next one is self-censorship, and it refers to group members' tendency to minimize their doubts and counter arguments. This is when people begin to second guess their own ideas. So that's when kind of holes start getting into their plan because they're like, oh, but what if it doesn't work? Oh, but what if this goes wrong? So this kind of, they will not allow themselves to think the book said that these advisors would not allow themselves to think of the innocent people that were getting killed because then that makes their plan seem wrong and unnecessary. But if that's the plan that they want to stick to, that's the plan they have to stick to. The next one is illusion of unanimity, and that is which suggests that silence is consent. Although some advisors in Johnson's inner circle felt differently about the Vietnam intervention, they were silent. So this is whenever you're not really okay with something, but you don't want to ruin the plan for everyone else, so you just sit there and you don't say anything. So kind of like when a teacher asks you a question and you know the answer, but you don't want to be the person that raises your hand and says it, because you might get embarrassed, you don't like talking in front of people, kind of that stuff. Self-appointed mind guards are group members who shield the group from adverse information. Um, these believe that they act in the group's best interest, so they do what they think is best for the group. So for this one, it was like how they didn't want to have to make all these allies, and they just wanted to do what was best for their country rather than the people that are giving them a hard time. So like what was Vietnam was doing. And the final one is pressures on dissenters, and this involves pressuring any group member who expresses opinions, viewpoints, or commitments that are contrary to the majority opinion. So this is like would be the one person that's has a different view on the outlook. I think of this as like in a courtroom or like in a jury, where there's always probably that one person that doesn't agree with the rest of the group, but obviously they're a minority vote, so they can't really do anything if they're the minority vote. That's all for the symptoms. The prevention of groupthink requires oversight and control. They embrace whistleblowing, they allow for objection, and they balance consensus and majority rule. This is a table in the book that kind of used ways that you prevent groupthink from happening. They require oversight and control, establishes a parliamentary committee, develop resources to proactively monitor ongoing social ventures, establishes incentives to intervene, link personal fate to fate of group members. So it's like, okay, well, if this goes wrong for me, this will go wrong for the whole group. That's how I saw it. Embrace whistleblowing. So it voices doubts, it avoids suppressing concerns about group processes, continue to disagree and debate on no satisfactory answers are given, and it questions assumptions. So it's like, oh, you made this assumption, I'm going to see where you got that and why you're making that assumption. This is like how people getting observed. So this would be like the boss coming in and asking, hey, why are you doing this? Why did you assume this? And like just wanting to know like where they're getting their logic from. The third one, allow for objection, is protection, conscientious, wow, can't say that word. Objectors provide for group members' exits, do not play down the moral implications of a course or action. They acknowledge private concerns about ethical issues in the group. So this one is like, I think of it as getting pulled to the side and being like, hey, I know you're not doing well with this group, but like, what's your plan of action? And it's like taking someone to the side and just asking their concerns without the rest of the group around so they don't get judged. And then the balanced consensus and majority rule, it alters rule governing choices. They relieve pressure on groups in minority positions. They dissuade the development of subgroups, introduce a multiple advocacy approach to decisions. So this is like making sure you're working with a full group and you're not getting cliquey in between. So I know like personally, I've seen with like sports teams that I've been around in my past, like you have all those different people that only hang out with each other, and that can kind of start like problems on during games and stuff because you don't interact with the others around you. You only interact with the ones yourself or you put yourself with. So that's how I thought of those. Those were the prevention methods. And that's all I got. Thanks for listening. Bye.